Hey everybody, it's Masood here at Buddyfight News Corner with this week's Hero World Deck of the Week, and this is Force Elements Zeta. This is the Avatar. So we're going to start things off. We have 4 copies of Water Demon, size 2. This is a 5/2/6 on entry. Send a gauge from your opponent's field to the drop zone, cost 1 gauge for call. And we've got 4 copies of the size 2 Wind Demon. This is a 5/2/4, cost of 1 gauge. When it enters the field, you can bounce a card from the opponent's field into their hand, and it has move. We have 2 copies of the size 1 Water Demon. It is free to call. On entry, you send a soul from an opponent's a card on the opponent's field to the drop zone, which kind of is bad in the upcoming meta because of the Oni Assassins, but, you know, we'll take it as we go. Good card is good in its own way. 4 copies of Mud Demon, size 1, and after it attacks, it can destroy itself in order to build you a gauge. Also, just a heads up, this card destroys itself at the end of its battle, as does the other fire one I'll get to in just a moment. 2 copies of the size 0 Earth Elemental, and this one, at the end of its battle, can sack itself in order to gain you a life. 4 copies of the size 1 Fire Elemental, because when this thing is called, it destroys a monster in the opponent's center, and during the end phase, it destroys itself. Well, at the end of turn, which is the end of final phase. And 2 copies of the size 1 Wind Elemental. This is if your buddy is an impact monster, you can discard this during the main phase in order to put a soul from a monster in the opponent's field into the drop zone. And 2 copies of the size 3 Fire Elemental. This is 1 gauge to call, and when it enters the field, destroy a monster on the opponent's field. So that's a lot of impact monsters, and the reason why that works is because Zeta. This is 4 copies of original Zeta. I actually buddied this one in this build. It's 3 gauge to call, 2 gauge to impact transform into. It counts as an item which has been transformed into when you do. If you're transformed, it can't be destroyed and it can't be returned to hand. But when you're transformed into a Zeta, you cannot call monsters other than impact monsters, but you can impact call as many times as you want, which is why all of the monsters are impact monsters. And then here is the bread and butter of the deck. This is Force Element Zeta. Pretty much the same thing as this Zeta, except this is a 9/3/4, this is an 8/2/4, but it has the additional effect that when it attacks, you can add, send 1 wind, 1 water, 1 earth, and 1 fire from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck in order to burn your opponent for 4. And that is really good against walls because you just swing and you don't care because you burn them for 4. And because of how it stacks, your opponent only gets 1 counterattacking to respond to both the attack and the burn for 4 damage. So, really good card. Now, this deck does get better if you use the Secret Pack Zeta in place of this. Because then even if you're not on Force Elements, you can just build a lot of crit. But I like how this one delivers the damage in 2 separate packets. Now getting into the spells, I run 2/3 gauge, which is counter. If you have a Zeta or Gem Clone on the field, put 3 gauge from the top of your deck into the gauge. And 4 I've seen through your moves, you know, shields. 4 copies of Void Hole, which is pay a life to nullify an attack, and if you have a Zeta, you add an impact monster from your drop zone back to your hand. 2 copies of Gauge and Draw, which you can discard an impact monster in order to put top card of your deck in your gauge and draw 2 cards. So being able to generate resources is nice. 2 copies of Finish Road. If you have a Zeta on the field, sack an impact monster in order to call an impact monster from your drop zone by paying its call cost. Helps with getting out extra attacks and also with getting the right elements into the drop zone. 2 copies of 2 Draw, which is if you have a Zeta or Gem Clone, pay 1 gauge to draw 2. And lastly, 2 copies of Fine Joker, which you can cast once per turn to add a Gem Clone or a Zeta from your deck to your hand. Yeah, this is this is the deck. It's a budget build. Like I said, this doesn't utilize any of the things from the secret pack, but if you use this, if you replace this with the secret pack Zeta, it does just get better. But yeah, here is the Hero World deck of the week. This is for Chase, and we will be looking forward to answering or replying to whatever comments you guys leave. Like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for even more excitement here on Buddyfight News Corner.